Good morning. A nice rainy morning for us, but we need the rain, so I'm glad to hear it and see it. Glad to see you all here, though, even more so. We have been past couple of Sundays talking about why we come together, and we've talked about the idea of coming together to sing, and we've talked about just in general the reason and kind of some of the surroundings behind how we decide to do those things as far as pattern and purpose and things even before that. Last week we talked about the Lord's Supper, and this morning we're going to talk about the idea we come together to learn. That's in part why we come together. We come together to learn from God, to learn from each other, to sing. We said that in our singing. Even our singing is to teach one another. So we come together to learn. I don't know if you've thought of it this way, but I hope that you'll consider it as I say this. All of your letters in the New Testament were written to churches, except maybe one, two, if you include one of the John letters, but the book of Philemon. You have these letters that are written to churches because that's when all the saints would be gathered to learn. And so Paul would write to Corinth, and he knows that they're going to gather together to read what he wrote together. Or he writes to the church at Galatia, or the churches in Galatia, for the same purpose. We even see that in the letter of John, the Gospel of John, the Gospel according to John, however you want to phrase that, as he makes mention to his audience in chapters 21 and 21, chapter 20 and 21. We'll come together to learn. I don't think that's any kind of groundbreaking idea. We understand that. But we do come together to learn, and the question ultimately, though, is, from whom are we learning? We have a few things I want to put us in front of us before we look at that story from the Old Testament. But it comes down to our way or his way. Are we going to learn from our own desires and our own wants and our own, suppositions in this life, or are we going to learn from God? And a couple things that kind of just to put in front of us as we get started, our culture is very selfish and self-centered. I don't know that that's necessarily new, but it certainly is today. And maybe it's always been that way. But it is a very self-seeking world. And I think that is easy to see. It's easy to, pin down. It's not hard. We're not breaking any ground with that kind of statement. We know that culture is promoted in everything we see and do. There's very unhealthy habits that we have as part of this. I don't know if American culture, Western culture, however you want to look at it. Though again, I'd say this is in most cultures that mankind is dominant. Think about how we word things. And this is not new. This has been going on for 10 plus years. This phrase, someone's truth. My truth, your truth. That doesn't even make any sense. Now, if you're talking about your story, and these are the facts of your story, that would make sense, but that's not what they're talking about. They're talking about their opinion and their perspective being their truth. Well, if that's true, then it's not truth. Truth is objective. It shouldn't matter if it's you observing it or me observing it. The whole idea is that's what's true. And I'll give you a really simple example. It's not hard. If we all climbed up on top of the church building's roof, and I don't care if John's opinion or my opinion were different, and John thought, if I stepped off this, I'm going to fall and hit the ground. And I thought my truth was, if I step off this, I'm going to float away. Guess what? The ground says, this is truth. Welcome. Right? There are some things that are just true. It doesn't matter what our thoughts or opinions about them are. And yet we go into a culture where it's my truth, your truth. It's underneath a lot of the arguments we have politically and socially and culturally right now. And the truth is that it goes back to the idea of I want to be the determiner of what is true. And as long as I feel that way, you feel that way, and your neighbor feels that way, guess what? We're going to have all this division and confusion, and we're going to have competing ideas, and that's just the nature of it. Or we can learn from God. But one of the things I want to put this a little bit lengthier statement, if you're a note taker, I really want you to focus in on this with me. When self is elevated, we don't see Jesus as our teacher. We may proclaim his name, but we inherently do not see him as our teacher. And this is what ends up happening. We rather see ourselves as already holding truth, and then Jesus becomes a stamp of approval for our beliefs. This is repeatable so many times with so many, and if we're not careful, we could be amongst those, or have been amongst those, where we hold the truth and then we go to Scripture to back up what we already believe. In Jesus' day, we've been talking about Jesus and his life and so forth in our study on Sunday morning. And we have these Pharisees, these Sadducees, these religious leaders. They believed they held truth. They believed they understood truth. And they only agreed with Jesus or John the Baptizer or whoever came along as long as they agreed with them. It didn't matter how many miracles Jesus did. They held the truth in their mind. They were wrong. Just plain and simple. They were wrong. And the reason why they couldn't see it is because they didn't want anybody else to be their teacher. They believed they had arrived. Our culture is just rampant with this. I don't think it's a new thing. I just think it's an observed thing. That you'll walk up to someone. I don't know how many times I've had a conversation or heard a conversation, been a part of a conversation, read, whatever the case may be. And someone says, I believe every word in the Bible. But they've never read the Bible. They believe they already know it. They already understand it. When self is elevated, we don't see Jesus as our teacher, even if we proclaim to, but rather we see ourselves as already holding truth, and Jesus just becomes a rubber stamp. That's not learning from Jesus. That's not why we should come together. We should come together to learn from Jesus. Yes, there may be a person like myself this morning standing up here leading that thought process, or on the Bible class, or downstairs in one of the Bible classes, wherever it may be. But if it's not Jesus we're learning from, we're doing it wrong. I mean, I don't want to be, harsh with it, but it's just true. So let's consider a couple things to help kind of meld this into something we can use. At least I hope so. We're going to go back to the Old Testament and 2 Kings. You're probably familiar with this story. It's the story of Naaman. He is a Syrian general. Not Assyrian, but Syrian. And he is a big to-do. He is a man with a lot of power, a lot of prestige, probably a lot of wealth, and does and gets anything he wants. Except he has leprosy. And if you know anything about leprosy, especially in ancient times, it's basically a slow death sentence. I mean, you're not going to walk away from it. Now, there are people who are healed, and there's a process to recognize that in the Old Testament and in those days. But pretty much the case was, if you get leprosy, it's a death sentence. It's a tragic. It's I can't imagine. It is not just, hey, I've got bad skin. It just basically rots the body. It has to be one of the worst ways to live and die. He has it. Let's pick up in the story. We're not going to read the whole thing. We're going to allude to parts of it. But it's pretty long. But we are going to start in the very first verse of chapter 5. 2 Kings chapter 5 this morning. Behind me is going to be, and that's not changing. Why is it not changing? You all didn't tell me that. It's still on the same. Well. Well, we're just going to go with your Bible this morning. I don't know what's up with the projector there. It's changed on my screen in front of me. All right. 2 Kings chapter 5, verse 1. Now Naaman, commander of the army of the king of Syria, was a great and honorable man in the eyes of his master, because by him the Lord had given victory to Syria, and he was also a mighty man of valor, but a leper. In verse 2, 2 Kings chapter 5, and the Syrians had gone out on raids, had brought back captive a young girl from the land of Israel, and she waited on Naaman's wife. And then she said to her mistress, if only my master were with the prophet who is in Samaria, for he would heal him of the leprosy. And Naaman went in and told his master, saying, thus and thus said the girl, and who is from the land of Israel. And then the king of Syria said, go now, and I will send a letter to the king of Israel. So he departed and took with him 10 talents of silver, 6,000 shekels of gold, and 10 changes of clothing. So he's heard this news from this young girl that there's a prophet in Israel that can cure him of his leprosy. He gets all this money together. He gets some nice clothes together. And he's going to go basically try to purchase his healing. That's really what he's going to do. So again, he's a man of renown. He's a man of power. He's a man of some substance. He is a man who is well-to-do. You can see that by what he's able to easily gather. And as we're looking at the concepts behind this and see who and how he thinks, I think he thinks just like most people do. If I have enough money, I can purchase what I need, what I want. If I have enough means, I can get what I want. If I have enough power, people will listen. Whatever that frame of mind is, he has it. And no doubt he is a successful man in all that he has done. That's kind of alluded to, though God has given credit. I love how the writer writes that. But he's like, okay, we're going to send all this to get Elisha to come and to heal him. All right, so verse 6. In verse 6 it says, then he brought the letter to the king of Israel, which said, now be advised when this letter comes to you that I have sent Naaman my servant, and to you that you may heal him of his leprosy. So we have Naaman's king sending this letter on his behalf. I'm sending him to you. So now we've also got the king involved in it. So Naaman's pride, we have the king's authority, and all this coming to Israel for this request of healing. Verse 7, and it happened when the king of Israel read the letter that he tore his clothes and said, am I a God to kill and make alive, that this man sends a man to me to heal him of his leprosy? Therefore, please consider and see how he seeks a quarrel with me. So the king thinks he's just trying to set him up for war. So it was when Elisha, the man of God, heard that the king of Israel had torn his clothes, that he said to the king, saying, why have you torn your clothes? Please let him come to me, and he shall know that there is a prophet of Israel. Or a prophet, in Israel. Then Naaman went with his horses and chariots, and he stood at the door of Elisha's house. And that takes us to what Ryan read this morning in verses 10 and 11. Now, you have the backstory a little bit there. This man is powerful. He has wealth he has to do. He also has the king's backing and the king's letter. He's going right to the king of Israel. The king of Israel is like, what do I can't do anything about this. Elisha says, okay, just let him come to me. He can know that there's a prophet here. By the way, this is all set up by a young girl. There's a lesson in that alone. She's not named. It just says this young girl who was taken captive sets this whole thing in motion. But here he is now standing in front of Elisha's house. And look what it says. But Naaman became furious. Now Naaman's the one who's sick. Naaman is the one who's basically in the place of begging. So how is he mad? How is he angry? Because he believes people should service him. Because he is somebody. But Naaman became furious and went away and said, indeed, I said to myself, he will surely come out to me and stand and call on the name of the Lord his God and wave his hand over the place and heal the leprosy. And straight out like a little magic act. You're going to just wave your hand, alakazam. And the leprosy will be gone. This is what he had in his mind. And remember, who's our teacher? Remember what we said in the beginning, that this is certainly live and well in our culture today, but I don't think it's new. When we are our teacher, when we believe we know, when we have our truth, we end up furious when other people don't mend to it. He thought, I said, God had other plans. Look at verse 12. Are not the Abana and the Pharpar, and I'm sorry, Ryan, those are hard names. I forgot they were in there. Credit to you, man. The rivers of Damascus better than the waters of Israel. In other words, and if you've ever been to the Jordan, I don't know if anybody's been there. I've not been able to. I'd love to one day. Hope I can make it there. It's pretty muddy water, and it's not very clean. And no doubt he's saying, well, these are much more beautiful bodies of rivers of water. Wouldn't they be better? Where's he reasoning from? His own mind, his own heart, his own desire, his own eyes. And do we not do that? Do people not do that today and say, well, wouldn't it be better if? I know God said something, but you know what? We can come back and this would be better, right? God wouldn't care. Where does it come from? Could I not wash in them and be clean? So he turned and went away in a rage. What was asked of him? We didn't read that part. We're going to in just a second. But you know the story. You've probably heard it before. He expected to show up at this house. He's standing outside. He's expecting these things to happen. And so we gave that before that. So let's go back and actually hear what Elisha did. Verse 8. Verse 9. Then Naaman went with his horses and chariot. He stood at the door of Elisha's house, and Elisha sent a messenger to him, saying, Go and wash in the Jordan 7 times, and your flesh shall be restored to you, and you shall be clean. The man has a death sentence. The man has a disease that nobody can heal. I guarantee you, every proclaimed healer, soothsayer, witch, whatever that he could find, he's probably already visited. No doubt he's spent a ton of money on whatever snake oil somebody was selling. And yet he shows up at this house and he believes he knows what is true and what is right so much that when, this is what he's asked, to take away a life sentence, to give him back his life in his future. Elisha said, what? Verse 10 again, Go and wash in the Jordan 7 times, and your flesh shall be restored to you, and you shall be clean. That's it. Do you see how his own selfish view of how things should be gets in the way with hearing something that's not that complicated? I mean, he didn't even ask of him what Jesus asked of the rich young nobleman, to sell all of his stuff. Who's our teacher? Who do we listen to? When we come together to learn, are we here to hear what God says and what God teaches and what God shares? Or do we arrive thinking we already have it and we're just waiting for God to pat us on the back? It's a question we need to ask, not only of ourselves, but just in general. This is what Jesus charges us. And if you know the rest of the name and story, I don't want to leave it just hanging there. The young girl, again, speaks up. If I'm not mistaken, at least one of his servants speaks up and says, Master, if he would have asked you to do something elaborate, wouldn't you have done it? Basically, what do you got to lose? So he goes and he dips. And I know we use the story all the time to talk about obedience. which is good, and it's a great story to use it, because he dips the first time, and he's still got leprosy, and he dips the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth, and the sixth time, he still has leprosy, until he does what God says, and he dips the seventh time. And when he dips the seventh time, it says his flesh became like a newborn. We talk about obedience all the time. We're a lot. But if we think we know better than God, we're not going to be obedient. That's just the truth of it. Naaman thought he knew better than God. Naaman was furious because Elisha didn't do it the way he wanted him to do it. I think Elisha added to it because Elisha didn't even come out and say anything. He sent his servant to him. I mean, imagine that. But it comes back to, are we our teacher? Do we allow our wants and desires, our wishes and our thoughts to be what rules, or do we learn from God? Look what Matthew writes. This is Jesus' words in Matthew 11, some very famous words. He says, "Come to me, all you who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy, and my burden is light." Look at that very center part. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me. Now, I've heard some very beautiful renditions of kind of teaching on this, and they usually go something like this. Jesus was raised as a carpenter, and he spent his early life, no doubt, in that carpentry shop, learning from his earthly father the trade of carpentry, probably until he starts his earthly ministry. That would have been the normal for any son or in that culture. No doubt people had come to him and had asked him to hew many yoke for their oxen. This is an agricultural area. It may have been one of his main things that he did. I'm sure he built other tools and other things, plows and so forth, but he probably didn't spend all of his time making furniture or building houses. When we hear carpenter, he's working with wood. So the story goes, well, no doubt that he was good at it, he was exquisite at it, he knew how to make a yoke that fit an oxen just perfect. And if it fits it just perfect, the oxen is able to work and work efficiently. If it doesn't fit just right, it'll wear on the animal, cause sores, the animal will get sore, it won't be able to perform the same way. And that's what he's trying to teach us here. God gives us just the right fit as far as the doctrine. And that's a beautiful picture, but I don't think that's what Jesus is teaching at all. A very cursory view of history would tell you that the rabbis considered their teaching a yoke. It yoked them to their disciple. And that was the picture. And here's what Jesus, now, the other may be true, that it fits us perfectly, it's right, but it's the idea of being yoked to our teacher. I don't know how many of you all have ever, whether hobby or maybe some of you all have seen or been a part of someone plowing a field with a mule or with donkeys or whatever. But think of the idea of two being yoked together and pulling. And that's really what Jesus is talking about here. That's the picture he's saying. And he says, take my yoke upon you, be yoked, connected to him, and what? Learn from me. Learn from me. All the rest is a result of what he asks us to do in that. Now, if we believe we already know, we're not going to venture to be yoked with God. We're not going to venture to be yoked with Christ. We're not going to venture to take on his teaching, his doctrine. And that's what the Jewish rabbis would call their doctrine, and would be used as a symbolism, their yoke. If we believe that we already know. I said this morning in Bible class, a great place for theology is movies. I said that sarcastically. But there is a movie that I don't know if you've seen. It's kind of a one that our family likes. It's a Jackie Chan movie It's called Forbidden Kingdom. And it's based on some lore from the Chinese of the Monkey King. I mean, that just sounds exciting, doesn't it? And, as perfect movie fashion, this kid, teenager, who's trying to teach himself martial arts, gets sucked into this alternate reality where he's living in this world. And this Jackie Chan's character becomes his teacher. And there's a scene, and if you can, I know you may not have seen it, but if you can just picture, they're sitting around a fire. And, of course, it's ancient kind of view. It's not modern view. And he's got a pot that is boiling water. And they're going to make tea. And this kid thinks he knows everything. I'm not sure, never had a problem with a teenager feeling that way. But he thinks he knew everything. And because he'd watch all these videos and he knew how to fight and all these kind of things. And so he's holding the cup. And Jackie Chan's character doesn't say anything. He grabs the pot off the fire and begins to pour the water into the cup. And of course, it's hot water, so keep that in mind. But he doesn't stop. After he fills it, he begins pouring more water in it. And of course, he's like jumping or whatever because the hot water is rolling down on his hands. And he makes a statement that I think really is a good statement. If your cup is full, there's no room to put anything else in it. If you already think you know everything, there's no room for anybody to pour anything else in it. And look, that might work for you and me in this world and worldly things, but it will not work with God. If we think our cup is full and we don't allow any room for God to pour into it, we are not going to learn. We're not going to grow. We're not going to mature. We're not going to be stronger in our faith tomorrow than we were yesterday. We really need to make sure that we're learning from Christ. I really encourage you all in every aspect of your life to make that a priority. I understand what busy schedules look like. We just run all the time, it seems like, and I'm not complaining about that, though sometimes I do complain about that. This is part of the phase of life we're in. Everybody warns me it's going to come to an end, and we're going to miss those days, and I believe them. I just haven't got there yet, right? But listen, we need to find ways to prioritize God, Christ, and learning from Him. And it may be small, subtle things, like on your car trip to work, instead of turning on the radio, maybe you turn on the audio Bible as you read or listen, have it read to you. Putting a priority on when the church comes together for Bible study is always high on the list, or should be. Taking time, whether it's just a couple verses or more of a formal plan to try to read whenever you can. I think we get this idea that if I can't read a whole chapter or I can't read a whole book this week, that somehow then I just won't do anything. And sometimes just a few verses, just to keep God's Word in front of us, is really what we need. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me. For I am gentle and lowly in heart. And I love this statement. I should have highlighted it. You will find rest for your souls. Why do we come together? We come together to achieve several things. We come together to worship, to praise. We come together to sing as part of that worship and praise. We come together to get around the table and to remember. But in all of those things, including what we're doing right now, we come to learn. And I hope that's what we come in on Sunday morning or Wednesday night or Sunday night, whenever it is, through those doors. I'm here to learn from God. This morning, if you are in need of prayers, and need to sit down and talk to someone about something that you've been studying and have questions about, and need to obey the gospel this morning, there is no greater teacher. There is no one who can lead us to the things we need the most and the best than Christ. There is no one who can give us the things that our soul needs, including the rest that he speaks of here. If you've not obeyed the gospel, we encourage you to give great thought to doing just that this morning as we stand together and sing a psalm of invitation.
Great Christ, your broken life, so marked by